I'll just deal with it.
Cool. So, right. Hi, everybody. It's Adam here. Well, there should be sound now, Kendra, hopefully. Lauren and I can hear each other anyway. So,
hello?
Can somebody that's here, that's a viewer, just give me a quick thumbs up? Let us know that you can hear us. Amy, for example. Anyway, hooray! Great. Well, Kate can hear us. Listen, if only Kate can hear us, that's cool. That's good. So, yes, lucky you. Oh, Nina can as well. Excellent. Double bonus. Okay, so first of all, I want to apologize for everybody that comes and joins this Talent Talk, because every single week we are about 4 minutes late in starting. And the reason for that is because I log in at 1 minute to and expect everything to be seamless, and it's never seamless, and it's entirely my fault. So my recommendation is maybe just log in 4 minutes after the hour from now on if you don't want to be sitting waiting. Because if I get Amy, who tries to keep me in line, if I get Amy to make it actually start at 4 minutes past, of course I'm going to turn up at 3 minutes past. So it's better that I think it starts on the hour and everybody else thinks it starts at 4 minutes past. Anyway, right, let's get to it. I am very, very excited to be talking about this subject because it's one of my favorites. We're talking about employee stories. Employee stories, to me, they really bring an employer brand to life. They really help potential candidates to understand, what does the coffee taste like at that business? What's it really like to work there? Well, maybe what's it really like to work there, because it depends if these employee stories are actually actors or not. So we need to talk about authenticity. So we're going to talk about channels. We're going to talk about people. We're going to talk about content formats. We're going to talk about authenticity. And these are all questions that I've got for Lauren. So I am honored to have Lauryn Sargent here come and join us. Lauren and I only met a couple of months ago. We were introduced by Laurie Sylvia from Rally Recruitment Marketing. So thank you to Laurie. I don't think Laurie's here actually today, but thank you to Laurie for making that introduction, because Lauren and I are on the same wavelength on a lot of things. So first off, Lauren, please introduce yourself. Where are you? Tell us about what's your CV, resume? Sure. What's your resume? Where are you today, etc.?
Sure. So I spent about 8 years in recruiting for corporate as well as contingency and retain. So I saw a lot of things. And my last role, I was recruiting heavily from Amazon. So great brand name, even at the time, of course, this was 10 years ago. And I was trying to get them to come to a company that had a lot going on, but no brand recognition.
Yep.
So I was constantly telling stories. Here's why people from Amazon come. Here's what the culture is like. And then telling stories about some of the things we were doing for customers. And I did think to myself at the time, it would be great if a company could come in, interview people that I've identified as really embodying the culture, and then getting specific stories that I could just use all the time.
Yeah.
So what's really cool about my experience, by the way, I'm a little echoey, so I'm going to lower my volume here. Can you still hear me?
Yeah, no, it's not.
Okay,
it's not echoey on our side though. Yeah.
Okay, great. So I don't hear myself now, which is even better. One of the great things about that role is that I recruited someone named Scott Thompson, and he was in a process for about 6 weeks, and he went on to work for the NASDAQ. But when I was starting stories a couple of years later, I thought about him, and he's now my co-founder. So he was someone that was a candidate first and is now my co-founder. So I bring talent acquisition and that thought of like what candidates need and what you need to tell them to get engaged. And Scott brings all the marketing to our business. And so right now what happens is Scott runs the project team and I run all sales for Stories Inc.
And okay, so right, where are you? And where are your customers, and what type of businesses do you work with, and why?
Great question. So I'm in DC. That's the easy one. We work with customers all over the world. mostly in the US, but we recently are doing some international projects. So we are starting to expand that way. And really, the organizations we work with are those that understand what candidates want, which is an authentic view inside an organization. And most companies that realize that to engage candidates, you need to be talking all year long. So that's something where we develop a lot of content that's substantive, but that makes sense. So like employer branding teams, for example, or head of talent acquisition, that's generally who we work with in an organization. The types of companies are kind of split in two. The first would be the companies that understand the need for giving candidates an inside view. And the others are those that have really great stories to tell, not to be generic about it, but those that know they have something really special. They have a really great company or a really great culture, and they just need help communicating it.
Okay. So I've got so many different questions about that. All right. Let's go straight into straight into the type of stories that work best.
Yeah.
So what are the type? What do candidates want? Well, actually, no. Let's do it from the corporate perspective. From the employer's perspective, what kind of stories do they want to tell?
So thinking about the companies that know they have something really unique, and that's a lot of them, they want to showcase the people who are doing great at work, who are really embodying what the culture's like. And they also want the stories that they think are work are the true ones. That's why they would hire a company like ours.
Yeah.
And also those that really can
There's
support
nothing worse than a fake. There's nothing worse than fake stories. But it's happened. I mean, it has happened.
I know. So someone said we were in a process, and I said, "Oh, well, we do employee stories." Like, "Oh, we're not going that direction." I'm like, "Well, what direction are you going in?" I'd like to know, like, what else is there? But that's because I'm so focused on what I do, right? I know there's other ways that you can do marketing, but in my mind, like, that's the thing that works the best.
Yeah. No, I understand that. When you're passionate about something, you're like, well, why is that important? You need stories. You need brilliant stories.
This is the thing that works. Yeah, exactly. And I'd say that a lot of times we're finding stories that support EVP or mission or purpose, because a lot of organizations already have that, but it doesn't mean anything to candidates. So a lot of those stories work that are supporting some of the things that you already know are true from like a strategic level about your company.
Yeah, absolutely. So how much of what you're doing are companies utilizing for the internal audience?
So they could, but our focus is mostly on recruitment marketing. So I'd say 80% of our content is externally facing. A really good example of a company that does it well, internal and external, is the Motley Fool. So we've done their interactive employee handbook. It's actually, for all intents and purposes, their handbook. So it's what they use when you join. This is the thing that you read, that you sign. But they've also released it externally, so it's a great piece of branding. We also worked with a company to develop a graphic novel, which is awesome. And they use it for internal onboarding. And then for some high value, by high value, I mean people who are considering other similar companies. Everyone's a value. That was the wrong word choice. But they would give the graphic novel in those situations. So mostly for internal, but then some recruiting. But for the majority, 90% externally facing, 80%.
Sure. What was the name? Is that because your customer is a head of recruitment?
It's brand and recruitment, yes. Mm-hmm.
What was the name of the company that you just mentioned?
I'm actually not allowed to say their names, but they're a global international gaming company.
Right. Okay. All right. So tell us, like, let's get really specific.
Yeah.
What types of what stories? What stories do candidates want? What are the kind of stories what do candidates want to know about?
Yeah, so they want to know really what it's like to work there, which again seems so easy, but still a lot of companies don't necessarily give it to candidates. And so that is sometimes, when we can find it, a polarizing story. So something that only really works or is true for that company, and it will, attract the right person and then detract the person that's not going to fit there. So a really good example is, as I mentioned, I worked for a company that we were recruiting heavily from Amazon. And one day I was interviewing an executive and he was telling me that on Christmas Day, he was delivering packages. And I said, that sounds awful.
Yeah.
So on Christmas Day, you're getting up, you're delivering packages. He said, no, it was great because our customers really needed it. That's their focus. That's their value of customer focus. He's like, here's a chance for me and my team to prove ourselves. And I said, wow, that's awesome. And I love customers and clients, but I'd be a little annoyed if I was delivering packages, maybe. So I wouldn't be the right candidate. Not everyone's going to get excited about that idea. But if you are someone that really adheres to that. Someone just said, yeah, he could have just been doing it. You're totally right. He's like, Christmas, no problem. Yeah.
Moniker.
He doesn't, but
we don't want to be.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Other examples. What kind of stories are the most impactful? Give us some more examples.
Sure. So a really good example of a slightly polarizing story. And again, it's still in a way that's, well, I'll just tell you the story and you can decide for yourself. So we worked with a software company and one of their employees told us this really great story where she was, she moved to the city, no friends or family, moving for the job. And very soon after she started, she fell seriously ill. And her manager actually went to the hospital, and when she woke up, her manager was in her waiting room. So that was a story that shows their love value. They really do care about each other. And as we're getting the story, she's crying. I mean, it's very emotional. And at the end of when we were showing everybody the footage, we said, don't worry, we'll edit this a little bit because she is crying and we don't want to necessarily capitalize on that. We don't want to exploit that moment. And the company said, oh, no, this is totally us. We are everyday crying type of a company, which is awesome because they're emotional. And I said software, but it's even software for like accounting software for banks. So it's even more surprising. They have this very, very emotional culture. Yeah. And we showed it to the person that told the story, and she said, no, this is me. This is what it's like at work. I'm very much like a person that is sharing my emotions, and that's great. So we developed a video series with tons of great content like that. But I can only say myself, but I'm someone that wouldn't want to work there. I'm a really emotional person. I don't want to be crying all day at work. I love my coworkers too, but I need that line. That's me. So if I watched all that content, I'd think this is a great place for Sally, for Megan. I know who to refer, but maybe not for me. I probably wouldn't be successful. I'd be uncomfortable in that environment. But again, not because I'm a cold person, but just because that's I'd be crying all day too, and that's tough for me.
I was gonna make a joke there and say that's like my office. I've got all of them crying all day, and it's fine. Now, but the other remarkable thing about that is that the manager was in the waiting room. But what? Yeah.
The story is amazing, and I didn't mean the story is great. And not only that, I should tell you more of that part of the story is that the manager was in her hospital room because she told him how afraid and scared she was that she was going through the surgery. So not only did he act in the moment, but he thought ahead. And they gave her best friend at work at the time. She had just started, but there was someone that she was really friendly with. They gave him the next day off so he could spend the day with her in the hospital. So it's a great story, and they have a great culture, and they're Kasasa. I'll give them some branding help, some thought.
Yeah, but the other remarkable thing about that is that it's an American company, and I assumed the manager was there to hand over the termination notice, because is that not what happens when people are ill working for an American company?
Not all companies. No, not all Americans. Not all American companies. No, for sure not.
I'm only kidding. Good question from Recruiting Animal. What about staff who, like you, are not happy with that kind of thing? I mean, they go and join that company and then they find out actually the culture is not really for them. What do they have to get? Do they have to start crying, or do they just have to leave?
Well, hopefully they would have known that.
Yeah.
before joining. So that's the whole point, is that you're electing out of the process before you get there, and you're like, no thanks. And that's painful for everybody, in terms of cost of recruiting and wasted time. And so hopefully the people see that before they come in, and the cultures evolve so much that you have time to figure out if it's not for you. It's a mutual parting.
How do you go about really, I mean, there's nothing worse. Everybody hates those corporate career sites with photos of models. And, how do you go about, and actually everybody also hates those corporate websites with photos of employees, which is like, somebody's white, somebody's black, there's a man, there's a woman, there's somebody old, there's somebody young, and it's like just forced. How do you how do you make sure that actually what's coming across is authentic? Yeah.
So I'd say it starts with the selection process of who you're asking to be storytellers. So what we do, backing up, our process is that we interview 10 to 12 people a day, and our clients pick who the people are.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm looking at the comments and saying, hi, Audra.
So you interview 10 to 12 people a day,
and we ask
your client picks the people. But are they not there? Are they not picking the people who are like the favorites or the top performing or something like that? How are they?
So it depends. So for example, Motley Fool, I'll use them again. They're 80% male. So therefore, if we're interviewing 10 people in a day, we shouldn't be interviewing 8 out of 10 can be women. So we say, what does your organization look like?
Yeah.
And then, it's something where organizations are really trying to, for diversity efforts, they're really trying to promote the stories of the things that the organization's doing, to get more people to create a more diverse environment. Yeah. So that's something else where we have to be really careful, because you don't want to take the token person and make it all about them and they're all over the website if it's just one person. But at the same time, if the story is what the organization is doing to recruit some of those people and some of the employee resource groups that they're starting that are working, then that works. So it's tough. But for the organizations that are picking the people too, sometimes we say it depends. If we're doing something like a culture sweep, a Motley Fool's a good example, should look like you. But sometimes we're doing very focused content. So we're just working with interns, or we're just working with veterans, for example. And that's something where it's a very focused storyteller who they're choosing. It is a certain type of person. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it absolutely does. Tell me what a culture sweep is.
Yeah, so that's something we termed.
Yeah, sure.
So basically it means in a day, you interview, we say let's say 2 to 3 interns, 2 to 3 mid-level. And the mid-level should be people who've seen lots of different things within your environment. So they've been able to move around either sideways or up, but they've had an interesting experience so far. And then some leaders as well. So we're getting a good grouping of people, and that's in one day. And that way we're able to create a 30-second standalone story about an intern experience. Then companies can use that immediately in college recruiting. So it's just something where you can create a lot of content at once that's still substantive and speaks to all the different audiences that you're recruiting for as best you can.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so Maury's made a good point here, which is every organization has subcultures. Inevitably, internal audit has a different culture than sales. Absolutely. In fact, I'm going to tell you something about that. This was really interesting. When I used to work for a big four, one of the big four firms, accounting professional services firms, and we all did the Myers-Briggs test. I was in business development. We were part of business development, communications, and marketing, and we all did the Myers-Briggs test. There was 300 of us, and we all had to stand in a line according to what our personality was. Everybody who was doing outbound sales was at one end of the room, followed by the internal bids people, followed by marketing people, followed by corporate comms, followed by internal comms. Everybody was actually in, it was really, really segmented, and that was really interesting. I was up at the sales end, but so inevitably everyone's got different cultures. Yeah, a couple of videos can't capture it. How do you do it at scale?
Yeah, so that's a good question.
Audra's point's a pretty good point as well. Lots of short videos, 20 to 30 seconds.
Yeah, that's true. I'd say the culture sweep, we're talking about one day.
Yeah.
That happens to if you need to populate something quickly, like a career site quickly. But a lot of times, for example, we worked on a global project where we went to 10 different sites, culture sweeps every time. We were creating over 40 videos, tons of photos, get everything transcribed. It turns into blogs. So it turns into a mountain of content for years. So there's a lot there. But if you want to do something like internal audit versus sales, we do what we call a deep dive. So we would spend just a day or two, depending on how big your organization is. But then we're getting that content just focused on that particular vertical.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it lasts a long time, and it lasts a long time too, because it's an employee story. So it's not necessarily used in a fleeting way all the time. It's something that stays for quite some time.
How sanitized or polished these? I mean, the employee stories that you're creating, they're across multiple formats, right? So they are. I've seen some examples of your work, and they could be video, they could be like blogs, they can be. Tell us about the different formats that you would recommend.
Sure. So it really depends on your culture, and it really depends on your audience too. So, for example, I mentioned the graphic novel that we published. It's for a video gaming company. These are very visual, creative people. And
a graphic novel is an amazing idea.
Thanks. Yeah, I love it. I mean, I'm biased, but I love it. It's great.
I've got a book. I mean, I don't like reading text personally. I know people that do, but I've got a book at home, which is like a coffee table book. And it's about 30 years old, but it's called A Day in the Life of America.
Oh,
and it's
cool.
And it's pictures, and there's like, I don't know, 200 different pictures throughout the book. And it starts from like, I don't know, the fish market in New York City at 4 a.m. or right through to, or it might be people coming out of a nightclub in Chicago at 3 a.m. and then the fish market in New York City at 4 a.m. And it goes right through to, and it's 24 hours. It's 24 hours, and it's like a novel. It's like a novel. So yeah. just that concept of a graphic novel is amazing. I love it.
It is great. And it was great for their audience. And it was also great for the storytellers. And we illustrated a story that really happened in the company that also matches a core value. So it was great for onboarding because new people are really getting the values immediately, as well as getting to know their coworkers, because it's things that the people they work with did that were pretty awesome. Yeah. So that would be one. The other would be something even as simple as a slideshare, which is photos and quotes. That's been very popular with candidates that we've seen. And again, it depends on the company. This happened to be a technology company where it got tons of views and shares, which is great. It's just photos and quotes from interviews. We've also seen blogs being very successful. Yep. It's again surprising. It was a technology company, but their candidates actually really did like the long form. So these are long blogs. And that was, again, a surprise to us because, short, and everyone's always saying, oh, shorter's better. And there's definitely a need for short things. But sometimes candidates really want to take the time with something and learn. And so the long form blogs that we created, there were some photos and some videos throughout, but that actually worked too. We also created a video series for a company. They were 5 minutes long, which is like a cardinal sin. Everyone's like, oh my God, who's going to watch a 5-minute video? But I can tell you that the CEO told me people said I wouldn't have applied had I not watched those videos, and they watched all of them. Now that's one company, but still, it's always surprises for me of what's working.
Yeah. Sorry, Elizabeth. TalentTalk Hall of Famer Elizabeth Lemke was just said she was waiting for the jab that Americans can only do picture books. So I didn't see it. Listen, there's not. Being self-deprecating is extremely endearing, so that's fine. Recruiting Animal says the problem is that it makes it sound like everything in the company works, which we know isn't true. Audra says, I wish more people had fun and took risks with videos like this one. So everybody who's like here as a participant, as a viewer, can go onto YouTube and look at that, but I can't because I'm hosting this. Audra, can you give us a 2-sentence description of what is that YouTube video you've just shared on there, so that Lauren and I can know what it is you're sharing? Let's talk about Animal's comment, because it's really important. It's so vital that a company doesn't give a completely sanitized version of everything's, and like only explains the good things. How do you walk that kind of fine line between, you know, selling it versus telling the truth?
That's a good question. So we haven't been in a situation where we've gotten a story that we thought was really true about the culture, but we couldn't find a way to frame it that makes sense for a candidate. So, for example, thinking of some of the hardest stories, and again, going back to the Motley Fool, we've worked with other clients, by the way, but they just happen to be top of mind today.
Yeah.
They went through a period of time where they laid off 80%. No, sorry. Let me be real about it. Something like 60% of their staff at some point. And we developed content all around that, even though it happened years ago. But the story was that they learned a hard lesson and they figured out that it was a business model problem. But it was important for them to put that out there. Like, yeah, this definitely happened in our history. We had a major, major layoff and friends never came back. You know, we were all this collegial environment. It didn't happen. And I think for candidates, they're looking for the inside view. And as long as your story is something true, you know, it's okay if it's about the great things that happen there too. And so I think that's our take on it. We've always been able to find a way to make it make sense for candidates. So I don't think that's the best answer.
What happens when the chief people officer sees what you've done and they go nuts because they think it's not selling it enough, or, you know, does that happen? Or
no, it hasn't happened. There's been some times when they've said, hey, take this story out because it's not the right context. And then we would agree, like, if that's not really what the organization's about, then we get it. But it really hasn't happened where people are like, this is not us. Mostly because I think we have unlimited rounds, and so you can see it a lot, but it hasn't normally happened where it's like, forget this isn't us, or this doesn't make sense.
What happens so I've had this a lot because I've been in a lot of my career has been spent in recruitment marketing, and I've spent a lot of time putting real employees into the middle of talent attraction type things. And then of course you get, by the end of a campaign, you get somebody making content and saying, oh, you've got to take John out. John's just left.
Oh, yeah,
it happens all the time.
We get that all the time.
Yeah. I mean, I don't see any problem with just leave John in. Most people are not going to know John's left. I don't know.
See, I'm with you, but mostly because it's a story. Like the person that I told you whose manager woke up in her hospital room. Yeah. If she leaves, who cares? That's still what the organization did for that person. Yeah. So not who cares. Sorry, Ray, that seems cold. But I just mean the story's true. It's what the organization did. It's what the culture's like there. So if John or Ray is gone, then
I mean, it happened.
Doesn't mean that you're,
the story happened.
Also really happened. You're right, they're gone.
You can't rewrite history.
Yeah, that's true too.
Now, the other one is organizations that have said to me, oh yeah, but like they're some of my best people. I don't want to put them in the spotlight because they'll get approached for jobs, right?
That's the worst.
How do you feel about that?
Companies that we wouldn't. There's very few. It hasn't happened a ton, but anyone that we have a sales call with that has that way of thinking, like we would not be the company for them. Same with the company that said, well, can we hire actors? And we're like, wrong company. No, definitely not. Yeah.
Models. Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Have you seen the people that work here? We're hiring models.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And actually something that Maury has said, who's on here, has said to me in the past, is it's about, for candidates, it's about finding your tribe. So if you've got some like technical manager who is actually, there's got a stain on their shirt and they look as if they've, I don't know, haven't combed their hair or whatever. It doesn't matter because it's about finding, her term is, it's about finding your tribe. So the people that person in that team probably wants to hire are probably just like that. Yeah.
So we say you should wear what you wear to work. At the same time, we do want people to be comfortable and like how they look. This is us. And again, there's other companies that are different, but this is us. So sometimes we'll show people a picture of what they look like if they're nervous, and they can make adjustments if they want. But we say, wear what you look like. We don't do makeup or anything like that. But you still do want people to feel okay of how they look like, because you want them to be able to share it. And if you feel like you don't look that great, then you might not.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. So another animal's got another point here, which is if those people that you feature in your employee stories, if they leave, it casts doubt on how great it is. It doesn't matter. It still served a purpose.
I don't know about that. Yeah, it's an interesting thought, but I don't know if people are trying to find the person in the video anyway. Maybe they are, but I don't think it matters that much.
Yeah, I mean, it shines a spotlight on them, but at the same time, like any company that's got like half a brain around sourcing, they know how to find those people anyway. They don't need them to be on a video to see how they're not doing a reverse image
John
search.
F. Right, John F. in software engineering. Or,
yeah.
That's I'm not into that.
What's another comment here? Maury has said, I love it when the head of employer brand doesn't like employee videos because they aren't on message. If employee
that's never
stories...
happened to us. I think maybe that's just because of who they're hiring. They know that it's going to be, the best content's going to be from their employees.
Yeah, but I'll tell you what, that is a very good point. If employee stories aren't consistent with the employer brand, the brand is wrong. It's not that the stories are wrong, it's the brand is wrong. And this is another thing. So I've got...
You can't argue with someone's experience. That's what's happening now.
Exactly. I've got a really, really strong view on this. You cannot create an employer brand. The employer brand is what other people think of you as an employer. You can communicate and you can do things to try and influence people, but I don't think that you can create an employer brand. That's a personal view. What do you agree or do you disagree? I don't mean to be confrontational, but
I don't think it's confrontational at all. No, all discussion is good discussion. I don't think it's confrontational. I agree with you, but mostly because I think employee stories and authentic view is everything. So I do agree. I mean, you can't make someone say that something happened that they're feeling a certain way that they're not, or were exposed to something that. So, yeah, I agree with you.
Yeah. Okay. Elizabeth says the key is authenticity and natural to attract others. It's easier to assume a face value approach of this is who we are. Yep, completely agree. Animal, do people you want to interview ever refuse because they know that what they say will not go over well? Do people you want to interview? So that hasn't
happened to us yet, or we don't have insight into it. By the way, I'm going to go get my charger and take everyone through my house. So no judgment. I have 2 small kids. Okay.
Well, yeah, okay. Let's take a look. Put the camera to the floor and let's see how much carpet space or floor space we've got.
That's the worst. No, you'll worse than that. So
okay, so I want to talk to you about we've talked about formats, and we've talked about what's kind of stories work, and we've talked about authenticity and that kind of thing. Let's talk about channels. So when you put all the stories together for the organizations that you're CNN video repeat. So we need your kid like barging in on a tricycle, and then your the au pair coming in, and or your husband or whatever coming in, and let's talk about.
If we had started 5 minutes earlier than 8, you would have seen a real mess. I was like, get out of here!
And then we'd have got the crying story, which would have been like authentic in your house, maybe. I don't know. I'm really kidding. So let's talk about channels. What channels do your customers mainly use to distribute these stories?
So it really depends on the customer. And we're really, to be clear, what we're doing is we're giving them all the content, and then the person who's responsible for recruiting your brand knows where to put it. So we've seen really popular Instagram campaigns, 15-second videos, or even just a photo with a quote has been done very well. So it really does depend. We've seen lots of different things. Graphic novel, we talked about something that's printed and handed. And then we also did a digital collection of stories. We also did kind of like a story site where you have a login. So only certain, it wasn't open to the public, which I was sad about because it was great. But that was just who certain candidates could view it.
Right. So that's what really high level content that is, what were they trying to capture data, or what was the purpose of that being locked down?
Yeah, they may have changed since we worked with them a couple of years ago, but it was that similar thought of like, we don't want Adam released to the public because he may be recruited.
Oh, I see.
Get access to this content. And that's not something we would be super into today, because we think the whole idea is to give candidates the authentic view, and that is doing only. But that is what happened. Yeah.
Okay. One other question I've got is what I think about a candidate's journey as awareness, education, consideration, and then application. Those 4 steps. There's all sorts of different ways of setting out a candidate's journey. But do you think employee stories are for people who are at the very beginning? They're just thinking about making a move, or do you think it's for people like who are they've pretty much looked at everything and then they're ready to make a decision on whether or not to apply to this company, or whether or not to actually join this company? What stage of the journey, of the candidate journey, do you think employee stories are most effective for?
Ooh, most effective. Yeah. Well, I think they're effective in all. So it's hard for me to say most effective, but I definitely agree, knowing that candidates go between 2 and 18 places before they actually apply. I mean, the awareness stage is huge, where they do need to know who you are. And specifically who you are, using stories, like as much as you can. And then I'd say it's definitely helpful in the closing phase. But hopefully at that point, the reason they're closing is because they know about you. So it wouldn't be great at that stage to all of a sudden they're reviewing the content. They should have the entire way through.
So what about in terms of the kind of depth of the depth of the information that's being exchanged in the story? So for example, you said earlier, we were talking about formats, and you talked about like long form blogs, and you talked about 5-minute videos, and that breaks the rules, because people don't really people don't really have the attention for that kind of thing unless they're really deep into the journey. So were they for a specific part of the journey?
So the 5-minute videos were used on a Facebook channel. So they were actually used on their Facebook, and then they boosted it with ads. And so they were definitely used in the awareness phase. However, at the end of the process is when the CEO talked to the candidate. And that's when he got the data from several candidates that said, I wouldn't have applied had I not learned more about your culture through this video I watched. So at what point that came in the journey, I'm not sure. Because really the data that I got came from the end of the process, but I know that they used it at the beginning.
I mean, you're a content production business. I'm interested to know about, do you have any involvement in things like live engagement or any other forms, or is it all content production?
The conference where we know a lot of employees are going to be over the head with the stories. We've been talking about stories, but the truth is we do want to prep people a little bit, enough that they're authentic, but enough that they know we're after specific things that happened. So there does need to be a little bit of prep. And our man on the street style things that we've developed that we turn into content still works. But we prefer to be able to talk to them a little bit before so they can have a thoughtful response of what it's like to work at their company. Because anyone can say, it's great, I love it here, or I don't. That doesn't help the candidates at all. It has to be like, what has happened to you?
Yeah, absolutely.
What specifically?
So another question would be, if somebody's thinking about using employee stories, as a premium kind of tactic in their talent attraction, how long in advance do they need to decide I'm going to do this before they can start really sharing them? I mean, how much prep time is involved?
Oh, not much. You mean for the company or for us?
Well, both.
It's not much time. So we say that we travel a lot. So we like to say from the minute we decide that we're doing it, that we take 3 weeks, but that's mostly for scheduling to make sure we get on everyone's calendar, and also for flights, because we are not diva travelers and we want to get the best rates. But we can schedule pretty quickly. It's herding cats, and the prep is, a step, but it's not long.
Yeah. I mean,
it's like 5 minutes of your time.
Okay. Yeah. So tell us about.
And some of companies ask that we just have a call where everyone calls in and we do a prep that way and then can answer questions. So we don't have to talk one-on-one every time. If we worked with a law firm with law partners, and it was just going to be impossible for us to talk for 5 minutes, 2 weeks before. So it was something like, give them the 30 seconds when they're walking in the door prep. And that worked for them.
Yeah.
It worked.
But then did they not scrutinize every single aspect of it afterwards and try and get things airbrushed and cut out? And lawyers, I find to be slightly difficult.
Well, they didn't do that. In fact, they were one of the easiest clients we've had, where they were like, sounds great. Yeah, that really happened. So but we focused mostly on the history there. And we actually flew in retired partners too. So it was an interesting project. And it was more on like the things that happened that they were proud of. There were some cultural aspects too, but it was surprising. You're right, stereotypical lawyers, but that wasn't our experience. They were great.
Tell us about Dallas. Why do you like Dallas so much?
Adam and I, our first call, I was saying that who knew that Dallas was this hotbed of branding and wanting employee stories. So we're in DC. We definitely have clients here, but most of our clients are in Dallas. I mean, it's surprising to me. But that's also a stereotypical thing. Dallas, I've now learned, is very cool, very hip. They are fighting for talent just like everyone else. And they're actually recruiting a lot from Silicon Valley because they've got the space and the cost of living. So they're competing amongst each other for sure, but also in Silicon Valley.
Do you have to wear like spurs and a cowboy hat?
They're pretty cool. They're pretty accepting of like, that's again, they're cool with the authentic self story stuff. So they're more progressive than you think, I think. Well, and if I like.
But do they have places to tie up your horse outside their offices?
No.
Okay. Recruiting Animal wants to know how you do business development. So answer that question however you like.
Good question. It's still something I'm trying to crack, honestly, after doing this for 6 years. So I'd say we first targeted great place to work companies. So we went to those conferences. We thought these are people who are doing it right. We were concerned, like some of these comments, like what happens if we work with a company that isn't progressive and great, and what do we do? And there are companies that we decided early on, not today, because we haven't experienced it today. But early on, we experienced some companies that clearly were not doing right by their employees, and therefore we wouldn't want to work with them because the stories.
The story.
Stories about stories. Yeah. Back when we started Stories Inc., how long do you have? We got a lot of stories. So I'd say we focused on only companies that were great place to work companies. But honestly, those people pretty much have it down. Not always, not all of them, but we saw there was a real need to go for companies that had great stories to tell, but didn't know how to tell them. If you're on that list, part of the process is that you've done something like that, where you've gotten internal stories, you've got your story straight, you have content that you've submitted, that you've been selected. So then we thought, who are the companies who are really interesting, but when you go to their career site, you don't see that at all. We know that they do cool stuff, but they're not telling it right. And then we would go real honest. I would try to contact the brand person or the talent acquisition.
Yeah,
person.
so that's another question I was going to ask is it presumably your customer is normally, well, it depends on the size of the company, I guess. Sometimes it'll be a head of talent acquisition, and sometimes it'll be employer brand or talent attraction or recruitment marketing, I guess. Yeah. Do you prefer if it's somebody that is like a marketing professional, or does it not make any difference?
Yeah, that's a really good question. The reason I like working with brand is that they see the value in the quality of content and the messaging. And the reason I like working with talent acquisition is because to them, this is like a whole new world. And that's exciting. And I come from talent acquisition, so I love that too. So I can't say who I prefer to work with. They do see our business and what we provide very differently. Brand says, oh, great, we can get lots of different content that's authentic, that's employee. We can do it quickly. That's great. Talent acquisition is more like, oh, great, I can pick the people who I know have great stories. That doesn't have to come at the end of the interview process. When I introduce like third round, the person who's doing great in that role, we can bring that to the beginning. So it just depends.
Absolutely. So anything, I mean, we've covered a lot today. Anything about employee stories that we haven't covered that you've thought that you really wanted to talk about today? Because if there's any questions I haven't asked you about, give us anything else that you want to find out about, that you want to talk about.
Well, I gotta say, this is the first time I've been seeing the comments as I talk, and that's been great. So getting like real time, and of course you've been a great interviewer too. I've never really talked about a lot of these subjects.
It's an opportunity. I think it's an opportunity. Doing this kind of thing is an opportunity to be kind of self-reflective, actually. And I think that I think it's pretty good for somebody that's running a business, because you can really actually ask yourself, am I doing everything the right way? And one thing I was like, why? One thing I was going to say to you is after 6 years of doing this, I'm guessing that you've now got customers who have moved jobs and are taking you with them. Yeah. Sure is.
And that's the biggest testament to what we do.
But that's really exciting when they tell you, guess what, I'm moving on. You've got to go, cool, where are you going? Yeah.
When are we starting?
Absolutely.
I'll meet you at the coffee your first day. I'll walk you in the building. Just kidding.
Hopefully not Uber.
A little bit.
Yeah. Brilliant. No, Lauryn, thank you so much for coming and joining me today on this Talent Talk. I've really, really enjoyed it. It's as I said at the start, this is one of my favorite of subjects in recruiting. So I've really enjoyed it. Thanks for everybody who's come and joined, and I've really enjoyed some of your points and your questions as well. Next week I think we've got Bill Burman next week. So thank you very much, and really good to talk again, Lauryn. And until next week, thanks everybody. Bye for now. Okay.
Thank you. Thanks for coming, everyone. Thanks for hosting. Bye.